The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on March 18th, 2025.
It's time now for Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And now here's your host, Pam Toompa. Good morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning, Gary. How are you this morning?
I am doing well, but wait, I got to turn my headphones on. I couldn't hear what you're saying.
Well, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. We're going to be doing a telephone commercial just to double check, but awesome. Well, it's a beautiful day in Pukalani. How is it down in town?
It's a nice, clear day. It's a little on the warm side. It's starting to get warm again down here.
Yes, summer is coming.
Yes.
But we want to keep those rains coming, too. So.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's important. Well, thank you so much. We're so glad to have you back. And thank you for all that you do for us for this radio show. We truly appreciate it. And just are sending lots of blessings and love to you for speedy recovery. And thrilled that you're back in studio.
I'm happy to be here.
Aw, thank you. Well, and to everybody else, we're happy you're with us as well. This is going to be an exciting day. We are going to speak with Senator Angus McKelvey, who has been in the Hawaii State Legislature since 2022, representing District 6, which includes Lahaina, Kihei, Wailea, and Makena. And I'm going to tell you, of course, before he was a senator, he also was a representative in the 10th House District, from 2006 to 2022. And he was born in Honolulu, but raised in Lahaina. He has dedicated his career to addressing the unique challenges of West and South Maui shores. With a background in political science from Whittier College and a Juris Doctor from Concord Law School, Senator McKelvey has been a staunch advocate for infrastructure development like the Lahaina Bypass, renewable energy initiatives, economic sustainability in Hawaii, and so much more. His legislative efforts have reflected his commitment to balancing Maui's progress while considering cultural and environmental preservation, and he's been a strong advocate for our economic health. So good morning, Angus. It's so great to have you with us this morning.
Good morning, Pam and Gary. I didn't know you were under the weather, but I'm glad you're on your way to a speedy recovery, and best thoughts to you that you get back 100% soon.
Yeah, we good, Gary. Sorry, jump on in.
I'm on my way to recovery. Thanks, Angus.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah, he's doing well. So before the show, folks, Angus and I were just starting to talk a little bit about, what we're seeing on a national level that's been so concerning to our community. And we were talking about the issue of tariffs and some of the impacts that we're seeing, some of the president's initiatives as they're playing out, how they're impacting not only the nation, but of course, how they're impacting our recovery. So Angus, why don't you share a little bit about, what you were just sharing with me in terms of how some of these things are rolling out and the impact on tariffs during this critical time for us when we're going to need to bring in a lot of materials and things for our rebuilding and how the tariffs will impact that.
Oh, exactly. No, and thank you for letting me start off with the biggest elephant in the room, which is exactly that. And, I think it's important. It's the chaos and the lack of complete certainty in all of this, which is causing even more issues for all of us, both in government as well as in our business community, our community. And when we're reliant so much on the federal government because of the Lahaina fire disaster, it becomes even more impactful than ever. I mean, there is a school of thought that tariffs can be a way to reorient a trade deficit of the economy. However, it's a calculated and strategic type of thing in which it's done with precision and over time. The way it's being applied in a, quite frankly, emotional basis is causing absolute chaos, whether it's the markets, whether it's your contractors trying to get supplies, whether it's your business wanting to know, okay, am I going to have to suddenly pre-order stuff now because I can't tell how much it's going to cost in a month from now. I mean, you have all of these issues going on. And then, of course, you have some of these what they call hidden effects of tariffs, which are tariffs on steel affect the rebuild of Lahaina. And, of course, as everything goes up, prices for other materials go up accordingly. And as a result now, the cost of doing anything, which was very high, Sam, as you and the chamber have repeatedly advocated for at the legislature, are going to become even more higher and unpredictable. And so all of this, and then on top of that, the other layer is the indiscriminate firing of federal workers. Many people should understand, many of the federal workers, especially in Hawaii, are veterans. The very same people who put their lives on hold and put them at risk to go and fight for our freedom elsewhere are being cut indiscriminately all over the place. This has a huge effect. Look at the national park in Hanakala. They're looking at, and some of the other national parks are looking at reservations or closures times. That affects our visitor economy. So these are the very different things that we receive a lot of money. Our University of Hawaii Maui College is a recipient of research grants and other federal programs that allow us to be able to leverage these dollars into education for our keiki. And of course, economic development. And economic development federal grant monies are one of the many pots of money where there's concern there's going to be clawbacks. So the message that I'm hearing coming from the East Coast back to us is we have to prepare for the mother of all rainy days and put away at least $1 billion with the B dollars for the shredding of our budget that's going to come. And then the other thing is whatever monies we've had, especially when it comes to that, we need to be spending it as fast as we can to avoid any kind of clawbacks, which could come down. So as you can see, all of this creates all this uncertainty and overlays. And then we have to, of course, create a balanced budget on our side for the state of Hawaii, a lot of which depends on what's going to happen at the federal level. And it all trickles down and gets you at the very end of the waterfall going over the barrel of this Niagara Falls is our families, our consumers, our neighbors, our businesses. So that's why this is very discerning to me, is because of the absolute chaos and the way things are being applied. Now, I'll just say this. I don't think anybody voted for a billionaire to come in and to do these kinds of things who was unelected. And there's no control over this person whatsoever. And the decisions that are being made, I'm sorry, are going to affect Hawaii in a negative way, are tied to this dynamic arrangement as well. So.
Yeah, and the level of control given to Elon Musk's department, is at a level that, I don't think anybody ever fathomed. That is kind of out of control.
You have 20 hackers who has potentially all of your financial data in their possession right now. You have the fact that we fired all these critical important people like FAA inspectors. When you sit on the airline and you hear that announcement that says, we're just holding on, we're just waiting for some paperwork. The paperwork isn't coming from the airline company. It's coming from the FAA safety inspector. So there's no safety inspectors. It means grounded flights and delays, and coming to Hawaii now becomes even less appealing, not to mention the fact that many of our visitors come from, drum roll here, Canada. Yeah. And my fear with all of this is being borne out a little bit, on this.
Yeah. I think we have to plan and acknowledge it.
Well, and all of this at the end of the day violates free market principles.
Yeah.
Fair and free is what Hawaii's economy is kind of built on, including the tourism industry. If you think about it, tourism is in essence a trade economy, right? They're coming here, spending money in our area. We're hopefully passing to them cultural appreciation and awareness of the specialty of Hawaii. And, but at the end of the day, all this volatility across the board, it makes it people very wary to do things like, come to Hawaii for vacation or when they're here, spend any money at all. And there's so many other, I guess, effects of this going on, but this is just one area. And of course, we have the issues with, again, infrastructure. And so many projects which we were pursuing this year, unfortunately, are going to be hitting the skids because of this.
Yeah. This is devastating to Hawaii's economy. But again, even as we look at all the devastation across the U.S. and all the rebuilding, we just continue to see disaster after disaster this past year, and now in this year, we're seeing, again, huge disaster.
Just 2 days ago, half the Midwest was on fire. In areas, it's all the same ingredients.
Yeah.
Heavy fuel load, hurricane force winds, and then you have a blaze that basically gets going in the wildland area and then hits the urban interface, and then it turns into a conflagration. It's like a rinse repeat recipe that's being played out everywhere. And of course, this is why insurance, which is a big issue still this session, as we're trying to move some important insurance bills, is a big deal. And even the discussion of parametric insurance is now starting to enter the equation, which is an idea that I think is going to be worthy of much more discussion. There were some bills on it this year. I don't think they really advanced, but as we come into this being the new normal, parametric insurance could be something that we need to seriously look at trying to facilitate over here, especially since some of these other more wildfire disaster-prone states are moving in this direction. So,
yeah, it's a whole new dynamic and a very different world these days. I mean, even down to the removal of the website on the 442nd.
I know. I mean, and what was the point of that? I mean, this is. This is the thing. I'm like, this is your efficiency. Really? How about instead you look at the federal lands that are owned by the feds that could be perhaps given back to the state of Hawaii, which could help boost our economic diversity back by providing more ag and other types of. Those are the kinds of things you think they'd be focusing on if they're really serious about this. But I don't think this is being applied with any kind of a strategy whatsoever. It's being applied under channels that are very, I guess, personal, for lack of a better word. And again, you have a lot of these knee-jerk reaction stuff coming out. I mean, orders are issued, orders are rescinded. Tariffs are threatened, tariffs are brought back, and then you have 200% tariffs on the EU on their products. And people may think, oh, well, that's European Union. That's not going to affect me. Well, it does affect you because as those tariffs basically means that those products are not coming to the United States anymore. So there's going to be a greater demand for them from other areas. And that means, obviously, since we're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it means that Hawaii falls perhaps out of, things become much more expensive for us over here.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, that with hyperinflation, the cost of living, I'll say it once, I'll say it again. I thought this was about cheap eggs.
Right.
And right, you can find any eggs. They're not cheap anymore. And I think that's what. So this year on our end in the legislature, I want to give my colleagues a shout out because they've been having to make very difficult decisions on bills that in a normal world, in a regular universe, would have been done differently. But because of everything coming down, we're having to be super cautionistic and pull back and try to save as much money as we can. And also, I think the message is to the departments is whatever federal funds you have received, you need to expend them, not just encumber, but expend them as fast as possible.
Yes. Good. Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that that are being wrestled with over in the Square building. And again, I know the House put aside $200 million in their budget coming over, but more needs to be done. I also thank my colleagues for creating a vehicle to try to help the nonprofits. They receive a big amount of federal funding and support. And of course, the federal government, they're going to be the ones upon whom the state is going to be enlisting to try to help continue this safety net that the federal government has helped provided for. And then the biggest one to everybody is the impending cuts on or elimination of Social Security and Medicaid. And while considered to be like, this will never happen, it's sounding more and more like it's going to happen. And I think for Hawaii, for us, of course, with Medicaid, that would be a huge devastating thing for these cuts. And I think that's what we're trying to really shore up resources for the future is for whatever types of things are going to come down on there.
Yeah. Of course, we're so dealing with, and you're front and center in Lahaina and dealing with our recovery in Lahaina, and it's just in our small island communities and state, it's a huge burden, and it's going to cost us even more because we're separated by water. So on top of all the other increases, we still have shipping costs that the rest of the nation won't see at the level that we do.
Exactly. And then you got the real world that is like, why would a contractor put stuff on a barge for Hawaii when, which means they're not going to get paid until when they can sell it down the road to Pacific Palisades.
Right.
And then So they have that whole issue too. And, everything for the construction and rebuild already before all of this, it was getting it's about I've heard quotes of 900 to 1,000 square feet. And you can only imagine now. I think what the one advice to give people with their contractors at the State Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs is to basically sign contingency contracts as much as possible to protect yourself against the fluctuations and interruptions that occur. I think the other thing that has brought to bear with the rebuild is that we've got to eliminate permitting so people can rebuild as fast as possible now. Now we're in a race, Death Race 2000. If we can't get them to basically rebuild, then if they're waiting to processing permits and such like that, then the chances of them being able to rebuild are really falling out of reach right now. And that's when you fall into the potential of a what they call a mono-economic speculation-driven boom.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you two stories that I've heard recently, and so I absolutely agree. We have to get the permits going ASAP. We've had a huge concern that we really haven't seen and gotten the public, especially the people rebuilding in that very congested area, where they were trapped. We still haven't really seen a good community presented ingress-egress map on how we're going to create the appropriate, roads and how we're going to plan for off-street parking so that we don't get back in that situation again. So we're really concerned about that. And then recently we've heard of hiccups because this isn't a planned development, right? These are folks rebuilding. And so therefore there's an issue of fire hydrants. And people are being told that as they rebuild earlier, that they need to pay for these fire hydrants and the infrastructure, which, that wasn't something they had to do before. And it's sort of like the Kula water issue, where if you're the first one to get the permit in, then you're being asked to present the hydrant. But we need sort of a master plan. We're saying sort of plan for maximum density, so that you look at the most, the water flow. And of course we have to calculate, do we have the water for that water flow, and how is that all going to come about? But plan for maximum density in that area with the appropriate ingress and egress that's safe. Looking at where we might have to, take some areas of land to make sure that we can do that, but get it done right away. And also it shouldn't be the homeowner's responsibility to pay for the infrastructure of the fire hydrant.
I absolutely agree with you 100%. A lot of people probably under the understanding that you've received this CDBGR monies, block grant recovery monies. Why that should be? We need to spend them ASAP. The clawback is in the air, and I would. That's one area I would hope that the county would aggressively be spending those monies to get this infrastructure in. And people can't pay for infrastructure because it's huge. The cost of infrastructure, especially since it's servicing the whole neighborhood and the whole community, right? I mean, This is why they're done by the municipality, by the counties. And so, people to have people rebuild the county infrastructure that was lost before they can go in their home is unfair. And I would hope that the council and the county will look at the situation and understand that this is not fair or pragmatic, and that this is why we, have a property tax-based system to pay for all of these things and assessments on users as well to fund all of these things. But I think that what I've heard in discussing the fire recovery with some of the California communities is the municipalities there made it mission number one to get people rebuilt back on their properties to get the property tax flowing again. Because until that happens, they weren't charging property tax either. And this property tax cliff, which will show up, I'm assuming here probably next year, is going to continue on in future years because they're not bringing back these properties online and being able to start getting property tax on them again. And there's also the potential for what they call tax incremental financing, which I put a bill in this year. Unfortunately, didn't advance, but the idea is that as Lahaina is rebuilt and regrows, the property tax just of these rebuilds and these new builds is going to generate more revenue for the county. So you use the potential future income to finance projects now. And I think that's hopefully something that can be looked at again because, and again, of course, trying to bring in investment outside of government, especially for our business community, I think is one of the things that needs to be continually discussed. And one of the things that I stress all the time on DBED and others is that, without a businesses, without an economy, people don't have jobs to go to provide for their families, to be able to pay for either their rent or their mortgages, right? And so bringing back the economy and the businesses is critical so far as everything goes, and is falling further behind, which concerns me, obviously.
Yeah, us too. I mean, we are seeing businesses, Leasley are seeing businesses, they survived COVID. Now they're addressing this with the downturn in our visitor industry. Many businesses are impacted. If you can't fill a full van or a boat, or, if you can't fill the restaurant, it's hard to keep things going. We're seeing some of the same things we saw during COVID as people have had to pull back. But for many, I remember when COVID hit, many said we barely survived the Great Recession and we're going to try, but we lost some then. And again, people are saying, well, we barely survived the Great Recession. We barely survived COVID. And now again, we're struggling as our economy's down. Yeah. And as you point out, Canadians have always been a resounding part of our market. They weren't our largest market, but they were a huge part of our market. And they were faithful. They came year after year after year.
Yep, and they were this time of year, the snowbirds, this is their time to shine. This is when they come in and they're regular spenders and they're, but it's out of patriotism that many of them I'm hearing are not coming to Hawaii. I mean, granted, some of the, and you can't put nothing, any scenario, some of these scenarios you would have thought that, okay, you're drinking something, but the reality is that these scenarios are coming to play right now. And so for the Canadians, especially coming to Hawaii, it's a very volatile proposition. And then there's the patriotism angle of they feel like they're under attack, right? I mean, why would we visit a place where they hate us now? And I don't think that's the case for people on Maui hating Canadians at all. Jump over the red wall to get to the blue land, maybe. But the thing about it is that, it's creating this is yet another blow and another impact on us. And then, of course, all the other things we talk about. And then finally, one component I think people really should keep in mind is many of our businesses relied on labor that were newly immigrants or immigrants that had come here on work programs. And that's why such a large part of the survivor corpus was from the immigrant community. They provide the many jobs, especially in the visitor area, that are critical. And the fear of ICE raids, and now of the basically even legal status immigrants being deported, of defying court orders against deportation, as in the case what happened 2 days ago. All of these things, your workers are fleeing, and consulate supposedly is telling people you should just go back to the Philippines and stay there until after the administration changes. But if you're a business or a restaurant and these employees who are providing this critical service are gone now, on top of everything else, it just makes it even harder for a business to keep its doors open and be able to keep pricing in an area where people can afford, including locals, especially locals.
Hey, Pam, we're about a minute out from the bottom of the hour break here.
Okay, so we have a new thing, Angus. We have a news break in the middle of the show. That's the station policy. But when we get back, we'll talk about some legislation that's coming up at the legislative session this year, and discuss some of the key bills that you've been working on, and talk about their impacts and how people can help. And in the meantime, I think, is that it, Gary?
Oh, no, that's my alarm. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Just also wanted to note that we were talking about that CBDG funding, and right now, if you look at the Office of Recovery website, you can learn how you can send your comment in about how you'd like to see that funding spent. If the funding's spent, and look at their proposals on how to spend that funding and comment on those. So look for that on the County of Maui Office of Recovery website, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Business Matters. Are you there, Pam?
I'm here. Thanks, Gary. All right. So, Angus, let's talk about some of the bills that you're taking up at the legislature this year. I know there's 3 bills, Senate Bill 830, Senate Bill 1170, and Senate Bill 1296. They're all measures that relate to special management areas. Can you talk a little bit about these 3 bills, how they relate to each other, and how they'll impact us?
Well, these 3 bills are kind of stepping on each other's toes right now, so they're definitely works in progress. I won't bore your listeners with the wonky technical things, but this is one of the great things about the legislative process. It's akin to building an elephant by committee, right? And so sometimes as bills move through these committees, they're amended by the chairs in the hearings for those bills, but then changes are made to other bills and they inadvertently can collide or cause issues with each other. And that's kind of one of the things that's being worked on with these 3. But the bottom line with all 3 is to try to accelerate the rebuild within the non-sensitive SMA areas of Lahaina, which are being included in the SMA because of other criteria. The rationale is simple, but for the Lahaina fire, all these people would be living in their homes and having their businesses because they've already had permits, right? They were already approved.
Right.
Now, because of the fire, they're being made to go back to square one and to reapply and do permits again, including the SMA permit, simply because they lost their place. And now we talked about the Fed issues, that the state had major vacancy, as in the county issue, before all of this. And so special management area permits are becoming even more difficult. So given the inability to be able to get these things done and tackled, and how badly we're falling behind in everything else that we've discussed in the preceding thing, we need to try to make some common sense expeditions now, especially, and I say this for, my environmental record as a legislator is clear, and I've been 100% support of maintaining and keeping our critical environment, which is, of course, our economy in Hawaii. But the feds could come in and do huge, sweeping, impactful changes across the board, like they've threatened to do in California, and tie disaster aid to it. So it is super important in my mind that we create whatever exemptions, we create them ourselves through our own statutes legislatively to ensure that the balance is there. But these 3 bills seek to do this. One bill, 1296, focuses on properties that are within the historical district of Lahaina only, which would basically they could rebuild without an SMA, but they would only have a certain number of years in which to substantially do so. The second bill, 1170, was a bill introduced by myself and Senator Hashimoto to try to help to expedite the rebuild of the public housing in the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation Lahaina Front Street Apartments Complex, as well as accelerate the building of a new project in Kahului that is now needed because of the spillover of the fire displacement on all our other communities. So, but we have the ability in Front Street Apartments especially to go ahead and to build back more affordable units within the very same footprint. And so therefore, why we have this other bill is to give the flexibility so that they can build just for these projects, just for public housing, just for affordable housing rentals in perpetuity only, that they would be able to build back, but also build back more than was there before. Also included in 1170 is a provision to help our friends over at the Weinberg, who had a housing project that was needed by many of our community members who either disabled or at risk. And they originally got built permit-free from an experimental housing law we passed, I believe it was 4615, and the county passed an ordinance based upon that, saying if you build with experimental housing, you don't need to get any county permits. Well, now they want to rebuild, but they're being told that potentially they're going to have to rebuild as they did in 1979, which of course isn't experimental housing anymore. It's ancient housing. Right. So the idea of that, so part of the things proposed in the bill, one of the discussion points is to perhaps amend 4615 to allow for them to keep this experimental status as they rebuild, again, experimental, which is their intention. And finally, Senate Bill 830 was introduced at the request of the Maui County Planning Department. And this one basically creates a global, across the board, across the entire state, suspension of permits if the mayor or the governor declares a state of emergency. One of the issues, though, under discussion is that there's a lot of, I guess, amorphous terms that are used in the bill that would give a lot of discretion to the planning department or director of interpretation. And of course, that can be concerning because if it's interpreted one way and not the other, it could have an unintended consequences. So these are the things that we are trying to basically look at with all three bills. But the gist of the bills is to try to expedite the permitting from our end so we can get these things rebuilt. But again, they're very limited windows, and there's a very important exclusion in there to ensure that the cultural and community concerns associated with the rebuild can still be taken into account.
All right. And we want to remind people that as we talk about these different bills, you can testify. And even if you can't fly over to Honolulu, you can testify by Zoom meetings. So, be paying attention.
I really want to push that one big time is please, everybody, testify via Zoom. It's easy. You can do it from your you do it from your car, parked, of course, not driving. We've had some great testimony from people. One person was at the beach, but it was the input from the community is profound. It's just as impactful as if you were there at the table. And a lot of times either bad bills get halted or good bills will be amended to help, particularly Maui and neighbor islanders, because Maui people are there testifying. So, and you don't have to love it. I mean, there's some measures yesterday where people are not happy campers at all about them, but they showed up via Zoom to testify. And sometimes it can be frustrating, especially with the technological connections, but it is important, and I encourage people to do it.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Senate Bill 1142 that would require mortgage services to comply with certain standards regarding the disbursement of insurance proceeds for residential real estate that has been destroyed or damaged.
Yeah. But for sure, this is one of the insurance bills we're working on again because of the Lahaina fire to ensure that people can go ahead and get the money from the insurance right away instead of being held up. And this situation this bill seeks to address has actually become quite a common issue in Lahaina. And it, of course, if any other disasters down the road, it could be just as detrimental. So this is one of those important ones that we see not only is going to help Lahaina people, but also be able to prepare people in the future for future disasters and be able to ensure that these things can be resolved quickly, if possible.
Yeah, and that has been a huge issue, and I'm so grateful that you folks are working on that. Let's talk about Senate Bill 41, the bill for capital improvement projects at the state small boat harbors and state parks.
Oh, yes.
Because that's
Bill
been a huge issue.
So, yes, it has. Senate Bill 411. This is the info. This is the info on 411. It's been many years ago during the Lingle administration, the legislature passed the law because of concerns over the use of the special boat fund, that any fund monies expended out of the fund for CIP, that would include maintenance, dredging, R&M, things like that, repair and maintenance, would have to be done through legislative appropriations with capital improvement project. And as a result, the DOBOR has to come into the legislature, ask for these things in a bill, and if we don't fund them, then they can't use the money in the special boating fund, of which there's money to do these things. So this bill seeks to give them the ability to use the special boating fund year round. We're not in session to address these projects right away. Like Maui is a great example where you have the catwalks that were falling in. We've got cracking on the boat ramp there. There's an issue that, there's some of the docks that were put in before hadn't been completed. All of these things can be done and handled if they had the ability to go to the special voting fund. And that, of course, includes dredging, which has been a constant issue as well. So now it's not the concerns that generated this bill over proper use of the special voting fund is still critical, which is why we had a reporting requirement in there that they report back on what monies are pulling out of the funds, what for, and et cetera, so that there can still be legislative oversight over the monies that are in this fund to ensure they're being used properly, right? However, this gives them the ability to get the money out. And again, it goes back to our earlier thing. We got to get the money out as fast as possible. And hopefully in conjunction with other measures, it will allow us to be able to do more strategic planning. The other area in which the money could be used for is quicker wreck removal or addressing the issues of grounded vessels, which, of course, has reemerged its head again with an incident a couple of weeks ago. So this is a reason why. And again, you look at Maui, it is so badly in need of immediate stuff across the board, and the legislative appropriation process could be years before work is done. So I see this as a way to get the money from the Special Boating Fund out immediately in fixing and repairing. And these, we also have money this year, though, aside from this bill. We're asking, along with the governor's support, for money to repair and rehabilitate and improve Lahaina Harbor, which, of course, is still out of commission from the damage of the fire.
Yeah, on that note, we've heard recently that this issue of dredging, and of course a lot of people have said, well, the Army Corps of Engineers dredged it, but then we've heard most recently that it, like a lot of the homes that had contamination just as a result of the fires, even if the home was still standing, we heard some of this is more of a contamination at the bottom of the ocean that they have to take care of. Do you know more about that? Is that accurate? Or
yeah, there was a back and forth going. From my understanding, Division of Aquatic Resources did sampling of Lahaina Harbor bottom and discovered, toxic residue of the fiberglass of the burned vessels down there. However, the feds disagreed, and it's basically said the whole harbor is just toxic from years of just stuff being dumped in it and falling in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was hoping that, given the DAR's findings, that the feds would be able to cover the dredging of the inside of Lahaina Harbor. That being said, we're trying to get monies as part of the monies I spoke about earlier, we're trying to get monies to do this, to dredge the inside of the harbor. I think it applied. I think the feds should have done it, but from my understanding, that didn't happen. So now it's up to us, but hopefully this is something that can get funded this year, because that would be a huge improvement for the harbor. Of course, water quality and other issues, right? Or when, because as you get boats back in there and they're churning stuff up, and you've got surge action, a lot of that stuff could end up back outside again. And so my hope as we dredge is that we do as much of a thorough job as possible. But I think one of the things that may happen from the feds on a brighter side, it may be easier to get either expedited permitting or perhaps for things like dredging, right? Because before we going through the federal permits and the multi-agency review is what made these projects go on for years before people hear about the money, and then they see the dredger 2 years later, and the obvious question is, well, why did it take so long? Well, a lot of it's the federal permits. So maybe that's an area in which there could be some cooperation given so that we can move quickly. Because we've done these dredges over and over and over again. We're basically, it's gotten to the point where they have all the information, and except for perhaps a dewatering area, which may move, it's pretty much the same, right? So.
Very true. No, very true. All right. Well, we've got just about another minute left, but let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing on SCR 59, the Kihei Boat Ramp Partnership, and the work that you're looking at doing in partnership with DOBAR, which is the Division of Boating and Ocean Recreation, and Kirk, which I believe is the Ko'olave Island Reserve Commission.
That's correct. Well, it's part of an overarching thing the legislature's tried to encourage. A few years ago, we put together enabling legislation to allow a nonprofit in Kauai to, in essence, with the state, run the state park in a cooperative manner. And Kihei Boat Ramp, like so many of the other places, is so used, to the maximum, and it needs serious care, and it's, falling apart. And besides 411, the idea is talking to Kirk is to say, perhaps you could be potentially a partner with the state for the Kihei Boat Ramp. They're building a new visitors center right next to it. They do a lot of stuff out of the boat ramp back and forth. And there was an incident, I guess, last weekend where they knew the boat ramp was going to blow up and be absolutely inundated. And they let DOBAR know, and they had extra staffing there for the traffic management flow. So the idea is that by maybe starting a relationship and partnering with them, which could, again, be legislation next year, we can hopefully be able to have them help us address some of these issues at the boat ramp. The state's responsibility would still be for infrastructure, CIP and such, but there are other things that perhaps Kirk can help us with. But another thing too is to help to beautify and create a cultural sense of place at the boat ramp, as well as make it more efficient for everybody, including them. They're users of it as well. So they've been very supportive. They showed up yesterday hoping to testify on the resolution in person. They've already started talking to Dobor, and I think this is the way with some of these other, with not only this ramp, but maybe many others where community nonprofits and groups can step up and be that partnership entity to ensure that not only is the stuff that needs to get done being done, but there are other avenues to address the daily things that make the harbor better, more enjoyable, and useful to everybody, especially the users that are paying to use it.
Very well said. Well, Angus, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. I know your life is crazy busy right now, and has been ever since the wildfires, but just want to thank you for your tremendous leadership, for your treasure trove of information that you shared with us today, and, for your continued persistence and perseverance on these matters to make a positive difference for Maui. Thank you so much for all you do. We really appreciate you.
Really appreciate you guys. I want to thank you and your listeners. And, we're going to fight every single day, every minute of that day, because at the end of the day, we're talking about us, our families, our future, and our community. And that is the biggest fight that's worth it. So mahalo to all of you. Stay strong, stay there, and together we'll find our way through the chaos.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. That was very well said.
Amen. Okay. Aloha and blessings to everybody.
Aloha,
Bye.
Angus. Thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
one. You bet.
Too. Bye. Well, again, what an awesome representative for us. But he's a tremendous senator, working really hard and very actively involved. And of course, the rebuilding of Lahaina and making our community whole out there and across our county, but also just a great representative to help us look at ways to move forward. So we truly appreciate all of his work. And as mentioned, we also need to thank our congressional leaders during this time and all of our state and county legislators. This is a critical time where we need to work together and we need to expedite our rebuilding and recovery efforts. So we appreciate all of their efforts. We're going to talk a little bit again about business. It's coming up March 29th. We are super excited. This is a fundraiser for the Maui Chamber of Commerce. It's going to be on Saturday, March 29th at the Grand Wailea from 6 to 9:30 p.m. It is a great mixer, and every year is a different theme. This year's theme is Vintage Aloha, that celebrates the 1950s and 1960s of Hawai'i and trans-Pacific travel. Very well and popular back then was Pan Am. And so, but it's paired with not only a mixer and a cocktail hour, but we're known for our phenomenal food. We have a food and wine style this year with dining stations serving delicious small plates, lots and lots of small plates. Nobody will go hungry. And the majority of the food will be cooked from the chefs of the Grand Wailea. However, Chef Mark McDowell from 62 Market and Patelli House will also be serving as the event. So this year's menu includes a poke bar with ahi poke, shrimp poke, tofu, and paholi fern poke with rice, various sauces, and toppings. There'll be a grilled Kalbi beef short ribs with tamarind cashews, fried shallots, scallions, Molokai sweet potatoes, candied macnuts, and a coconut glaze. We then have huli huli roasted chicken with sweet, smoky, and sticky Hawaiian barbecue sauce that you will cherish. Then we've got buckwheat soba noodles with hamakua mushrooms, marinated tofu, and edamame, kalua pork and cabbage from Patelli House, and a special dish still to be announced from 62 Market. But if you know 62 Market, you know that everything is delicious there. And then for dessert, we're going to have chocolate haupia and Molokai sweet potato pie. So in addition to our delicious dinner, you'll be delighted with cocktail hour and networking with attendees encouraged to dress up in vintage style aloha with a vintage style acoustic performance from Joe Chi and a themed photo station from Spotlight Photo Booth to capture the classic looks and memorable moments. We're also going to have specialty cocktails and local brew as well as seltzer from our alcohol sponsor, Maui Brewing Company. And then dinner, after the dinner event, it'll be followed by an exciting hula show that will take guests on a trip back in time, with the night concluding with our headliner performers, Nuff Said, a local favorite that people can get up and enjoy dancing to. We want to give a huge mahalo to our current sponsors. Our Golden Aloha sponsor is Alpha Inc. Our Trans-Pacific Trailblazer sponsor is Ainalani Pacific. Our Vintage Voyage sponsors are Airbnb, Aloha International Employment, HC&D, and Westpac Wealth Partners. Our Island Explorer sponsors are Hawaii State Federal Credit Union, Lehua Builders, Wow Sushi, Chios Restaurants, Goodfellow Brothers, and Pacific Rim Land. Our jet setter sponsors are 5A Rent Estates, First Hawaiian Bank, Hawaiian Electric Company, HMSA, Matson, Maui Grown Remedies, Hawaii Health, State Farm Agency of Kit Okazaki, and Zippies. And our media sponsors are Encore and Pacific Media Group. And if you want to have your name on the list, there's still time. You can reach out to the Maui Chamber of Commerce at 244-0081 and speak to Amber about that. Sponsorship levels are still available. Tickets are still available. We want you to, and sponsorships come with tickets, so you and your team can experience the fun and connect and network with other businesses. And that's what BizMix Maui is all about. So, and sponsorships also come with promotional opportunities like inclusion in the event program materials, being seen at the event through the slideshow and more. And we encourage them to register early. Individual tickets are $250 per person. And again, all of this is available at MauiChamber.com. And this fundraiser will benefit the work of the Maui Chamber of Commerce and is dedicated to supporting our economic recovery issues, our small business programs, educational and business support services, and continuing the vital work that we do to improve our overall economic health and support the business community. So you don't want to miss out on this premier event this year, March 29th. Visit us at MauiChamber.com. And, this is an extraordinary time, and it's becoming increasingly more extraordinary and challenging as we watch some of these other things that are happening on a national and global level that are really going to impact how dollars are spent by government, where emphasis is put, where priorities are put. And we really just want to strive that we need everybody working together to give input, because now, we're coming up to, after the summer, we're looking at a 2-year period. And so our economic recovery is critical. We need to continue to look at how we can streamline rebuilding and move on with projects and help government look at the funds they have and prioritize them based on our community needs. So I want to remind everybody, Angus brought up the CBDG funding. There have been 3 community presentations. The last, I believe, was this past Friday at the J. Walter Cameron Center. But if you missed that, don't worry. Go to the County of Maui Office of Recovery website. Just Google it. It's easy to find. Once there, you can find out about the CBDG program, the current plans, and ring in, ask questions. Everything that's put in on the website will be included in the report to HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development Fund. That's a federal program. And we need to get a solid plan in because, again, we're trying to get as much federal funding to help our recovery as possible. So don't hesitate, spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes to look it up, think about it very quickly, and get your feedback in. It'll make a tremendous difference for our entire community.
1 minute, Pam.
Thank you, Carrie. We also just want to say thank you for being listeners to the Business Matters radio show. Our Friday rebroadcast has been changed as the station is looking at changing their program lineup. So this is it. We're on Tuesday morning at 7:05. So we hope you'll join in next Tuesday, and we look forward to having you then. Blessings and best wishes for a beautiful week. Ahui ho.